For the longest time, I secretly wanted more. I often found myself shrinking to fit in, settling for what was comfortable, and even selling myself short. Once I finally accepted that we deserve success and we are blessed with the power to achieve it, I stopped playing small. I'm serious about building a life I love, and you should be too. I'm Denise Taylor of DeniseTaylor.live, and welcome to Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Happiness. I help women prioritize themselves, their success, and their happiness. Let's meet this week's achiever whose story will inspire you to push past your fears and soar. Well, welcome today to Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Happiness. You know, on this life's journey, sometimes we can set out with the biggest hope and dream, and sometimes it can end in a way we never imagined. In fact, it can end in heartbreak. And what I love from today's achiever is how she indeed was able to heal and forgive. You know, when I saw her, I knew I had to have her. I had to have her come share with us because though she was soft-spoken, she exuded so much power. And when I continued to scratch the surface, I got down to the diamond of Saundra. She is by far a woman of God that has been through, but did not allow her experiences to rob her of her dreams. She wanted family and she wanted life, and she indeed did go on to marry again, and now she has a bigger, brighter family as a blended unit. But the divorce experience that she went through now is something that she ministers to others on. She found that healing and forgiveness go hand in hand. Her sharing today, and though I know it sounds crazy, I call it successful. It's successful because she continued to see herself successful, which is superpower number one. Despite her experience, she saw herself successful and was able to come through it and now helps others. My goodness, you're going to be blessed when you listen today. She is going to share and impact you in a mighty way right where you are. Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Happiness. Saundra has turned her mourning into dancing, but it's been a journey of reflection, self-reflection, where she's been authentic about her own self-care. She's been able to reach a point of peace that brings such a beautiful, transformative work that she serves others with. And it's also peace that she now enjoys, and she gets to enjoy that with her family. It started off as a dream realized, and then life changes came, and she had to face the painful reality of divorce. Now, divorce is one of the most painful experiences that someone could face, but reaching a place of healing and peace often eludes people when they come out of that experience. It's painful to get over a broken heart, and it can make you feel like a failure. The key way to turn things around is healing and forgiveness. And I love how I had a chance to intersect with Saundra and hear her heart. And that's exactly what I heard through her transparency, her healing journey, as she shared about forgiveness. And I knew it was a must that we have her on so that she could share with us how she turned that experience of divorce into her passion and her mission. So welcome to Life, Love, in the Pursuit of Happiness. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you said yes to my invitation. Why don't you start off by introducing yourself and letting us know a little bit about you?
Okay, thank you so much, Denise. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate the work and the ministry that you're doing as well. I am married for the second time on my second marriage, almost 10 years now. I have two children, and my husband has three children, so we've got five adult children together, and we have one grandson. I'm a pharmacist by career. I work at the School for the Deaf and the Blind in St. Augustine, Florida, which is a residential school. And I'm a member of Celebration Church in Jacksonville, Florida. And I serve in different capacities there. I serve as a care partner for women who are either divorced or are having marital difficulties. And I also care partner couples who are going through marital issues. I'm also one of the facilitators and contributing writers for our new Freedom Curriculum course. It's a 25-day course that we meet virtually once a week for 5 weeks. And I serve with that ministry. And I'm also on the virtual prayer team. But I tell people all the time, I'm such an imperfect person. That describes me the best way. I'm imperfect, but I'm willing to share my struggles, my victories, my not so great decisions. I'm willing to share transparently. So in 2020, that's how the book released 7 Ways God Heals After Divorce was birthed.
That is incredible. Yeah. I too have a desire to see families blessed and saved. And, serving in that capacity, it is a labor of love, especially when you have to, on a number of occasions, reveal your own painful past to help someone through their struggles. And the only way that you're able to do that, especially listening to you list out all the ways that you're serving with intentionality, is to really have taken a healing journey and a journey of forgiveness. And those could be really two different things, because the only way you're going to be able to continue to flash open your scars, your beauty scars, as I like to call them, because they have now transformed from being wounds to beautiful marks that you carry. The only way you can continue to flash those open to others is to have healed and to have forgiven. So before we get too far down talking about that, let's set the stage, right? Because we all get married, and you mentioned you're on your second marriage, and congratulations for that. But we all get married with this fantasy that it's going to last forever. And so for as much as you want, tell us about the marriage experience that ultimately ended in divorce and sent you on the journey that you now share from.
Well, my first marriage was to my high school sweetheart, really grade school sweetheart. We knew each other since we were 9 years old. We grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, and our families were also intermingled. So we were married for 25 years, but now we are co-parents, and I call us forever friends. And we get along great. We've forgiven each other for any and everything that happened. It seemed like a whole lifetime ago, because it does not control who we are now. It's in the past, and we have truly moved on. And of course, now I'm in my second marriage, like I said, almost 10 years. And second marriages are a different journey. But that's another podcast, I guess.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm going to take you up on that, because I do have a number of women that I serve who are like, it's great to hear about what your first marriage was, where we were sweethearts and, we've taken that journey. But can we talk about marriage number 2 and remarriage? So I'm going to take you up on that one.
Right. It's another podcast. There are things that you learn about yourself, and there are things that you have to put in the past if you don't want them to taint your new relationship, which is sometimes hard. You have to have a saying in this marriage: this is not that. every time something happens, it can trigger something from the past. And I have to remind myself, this is not necessarily that.
That's good. That's
Let's
good wisdom.
separate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great wisdom. Okay,
Yeah.
so now let's go back to the tragedy, right? The trauma that you experienced and ultimately got over. And I'm gonna hit you up on talking about number 2 in remarriage. I promise I'm gonna come back to that because I think there is a lot of wisdom that can be shared. But when you began to realize that there was a necessity to shift, right? And even consider divorce, what was that processing like for you? Because, I sit on the sidelines of a lot of friends, of a lot of clients who are at that point where they're processing and trying to understand that dynamic of relationship. And really, it becomes an internal struggle for them to reconsider their self-value, look at it differently, in the sense of accomplishment and failure. So when you got to the point where you were ready, you saw the necessity to make that shift. What was that processing like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, you're so right, Denise. It's tough. The best way I can explain it is this. You remember roller coasters? You know what it feels like to be on a roller coaster, up, down, all around, slow, fast. When you're trying to make a decision, a life decision, such as a divorce, it's just a myriad of emotions. You have anxiety, you have anger, you have hope, you're frustrated, you're fearful, and you make plans, then you change all those plans. You give up and you try again. So it's just constantly sorting everything out. It's just a tumultuous reality of making a decision to shift and consider divorce. And also, if the decision to consider divorce was only affecting me, that would be difficult enough. But now add in my children, my family, my finances. Imagine the enormous task that really comes into play when considering divorce. The one of the biggest anxieties that I see and that I see with other women is, when is enough enough? When is it time to put the period on it instead of the comma? And that's a question that every woman has to answer when they're considering divorce. What I know now, that I didn't know back then, is enough is a decision. It's not a time frame. So each person's enough is different, and that's okay. And one thing I will add too is that when I heard the voice of God speak to me, I had a peace that I hadn't felt before. When he said to me, "You've been around and around this mountain long enough," I knew this is my enough. This is where I put the period, and this is where I end it. And so just being in tune with God, not trying to rush the process, because people will tell you all kinds of things. If it were me, I would be out. If it were me, I would leave. I would do this. And each person's enough has to be their enough. My thing was, I did not want to look back and have any regrets. I didn't want to say, I should have tried this, I should have said this, I should have done that. I wanted to exhaust all of those things for me, so that when I look back, I could say, I did everything I could. I listened to God. God told me when it was done, and then I moved on.
Yeah. And what I notice is that there is all manner of emotions, right? That you are experiencing. You talked a little bit about the anxiety.
Yes.
When you layer in, which I believe it may have been true in your case. I don't know that your children, how old your children were, but I guess it doesn't really matter. It impacts them regardless of their age. When you layer in that accountability and you love them, and chances are you stuck in there longer than you may have wanted to because of them, in your responsibility and love for them, how do you get yourself to the point where you're assured enough in that enough decision to move forward and do what you need to do for yourself. Because I think, and we'll get there because I know your steps, but we'll get there. I think there is a part of this process that is making it seem selfish because it almost seems like it's all about you, and like maybe you're not taking everyone into consideration. And so as you're swirling, like you talked
Yes.
about, how do you steady your emotions? How do you steady yourself, taking into consideration children and family, which had to be hard because you said your families were close knit and you guys
Right.
grew up together. How do you get to the point where you come to the forefront and make that decision for you?
I think when you find yourself making the decision for everybody else and you start to resent or regret doing that, you start to understand that your healing, your life is about something too, and it can't always be about everybody else. As women, we have a tough time doing that. We're nurturers. God made us that way for a reason. But there are sometimes He also wants us to be all we can be for Him. And I can't be everything for God if I'm compromising, my life for everybody else. And so you have to consider what's best. It's not necessarily ideal, it's not optimal. I wish it had been different, but what's best for everybody concerned. My children needed a whole mother, they needed a healed mother. And so I was compromising them, I was compromising them by staying in a situation that was beneath who I was. So when looking at it like that, I had to be a little selfish. And I knew that eventually we would all be okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good, because a lot of times we assume the protection that we are giving them is worth the sacrifice of who we are. But it could be we're compromising and not
Right.
giving them the whole healed woman or the whole healed mother, as you talked about. And so they're not getting your best anyway.
Right.
And taking that journey allows you to blossom and fully bring who you are to them and how you can
Right.
serve them. And I think the beauty of what I heard you share, and I know it's not the outcome for everyone, is that you and your ex-husband found a way to friendship. You found a way
Yes.
to co-parent. You found a way to heal and get past that experience that caused the disruption and the
Right.
separation, to make sure that who you all were as the whole person could still be accepted and present for your children. And
Right.
that, I think, requires the healing journey that you went on.
Right.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk
Okay.
about the healing journey and that process and what that looks like.
Um, being anchored in Christ helped me to realize that healing is necessary. He came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. So healing is a necessity. It's not an option if we want abundant life. So I am not living life abundantly if I'm constantly being controlled by hurt, jealousy, bitterness, revengeful thoughts. Healing is a promise and it's possible through Christ. I led a small group of women in my home who deal with the aftermath of divorce. And as I mentored them and talked with them, prayed with them, cried with them, not only did I see their struggles, but I also realized how immobile they had become. They were stuck. They were stuck. And they were just living life the best way they knew how from day to day. So you mentioned settling a lot in your materials and in your videos, that word settling. And that's exactly what they were doing. You know, they were working, they were raising families, they were going to church, but the fire had gone out of their eyes. You know, the fire had gone, the desire to thrive and to create and to produce and to plan their future, just to enjoy life. It was just missing. And that broke my heart to witness. You know, of course, my empathy alone didn't solve much. I saw their pain, but I said, I cannot leave them there. So for those women who desired to heal first, and then to truly live after experiencing the devastation of divorce, I wanted to provide hope. I wanted to show them how to submit to God, how to do some internal work, and how to embrace the new woman that they would become with open arms. So I wanted them to experience total healing and claim the abundant life that Christ died and came for us to have, because they just weren't living that.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
cool. And I think the relationship that you tapped into there is key, because there is a confidence and a surety, a promise that comes from the relationship with God. You know, I was just sharing with someone the other day. I was like, you know, I don't know how I would face life and everything it throws at you if I didn't have
Yeah.
that pillar of strength to turn to immediately
Right.
when life deals whatever circumstance it's bringing our way. And I think
Right.
that, you know, there are all manners of faith, and so I can only talk about the one that I have and how it enriches my life. What I would say to someone, regardless of what they believe, if it's not empowering you, like if your
Right.
belief cannot take you on a journey that helps to strengthen you and edify you and empower you, you need to seek the right relationship so that you get that from it. Because what you talked about was enriched by having a relationship with God. It was enriched and strengthened, and it had the opportunity to return that light that you saw missing, because it is a steady rock that you can bring into your life that brings the definition of who we are from our Creator. And that gives you the firm foundation to stand upon and be able to say, I can move forward and I can move ahead and I can lift my head in this situation, though it's coming at me. And I think that's where desperation comes, is when people don't have a relationship that empowers them the way that our relationship with God empowers us. And so, how
Right.
do you get that to the women you serve to go deeper in Christ?
Um, I think that, let's see, you know, we talk about the three-part woman
Mhm,
a lot at my church.
mhm,
Um, we are body, we're soul, and we're spirit.
mhm,
And when we make decisions based off of our body, when we make decisions based off of our soul, which is our mind, will, and emotions, when those two areas of who we are become stronger than our spirit, we're in trouble. We're in trouble on every level. Our spirit is the strongest part of us because it's directly connected to God through Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. And we have to feed our spirit or it will get quiet. When we don't feed our spirits, our bodies and our souls become stronger. We live in a world of fast paced right now. I want the decision now. And I've seen so many people make decisions based on the world, not based upon God, you know. So I would say to the women, how are you operating right now? What's the strongest part of you? Is it your body, your flesh? Is that what's talking to you right now? Is it your emotion and your will? Or is it your spirit that's connected to God? You know, when we identify if they're operating from a place of pain or if they're operating from a place of empowerment through Christ, we can see the decisions, you know, that are made that way.
That is good. You know, strengthening your spirit. And I would even say we need a regimen to sustain it in our lives, right? Some pattern of behavior, some consistent regimen that keeps our spirit fed, to your point. And I love how you said, when we look at ourselves, if we're out of balance and not really allowing the spirit to take the lead, to have the leading role, then something is going to go wrong. I think going deeper means that I recognize my responsibility to grow my spirit, to feed my spirit, so that it can stay in right relationship, positioning, in alignment with God. That's huge. And without that, you will struggle. And you will struggle in relationship, and you will struggle in life. So that's very key. So now we talked about the healing journey, and that takes work. And, you know, there are some very practical things people can do, whether it's therapy or coaching or like whatever the case may be, right? That helps to fortify that journey. But I think the categoric difference between healing and forgiveness are very, very different. And healing and forgiveness, though they go hand in hand, they require something different from us. And when I heard you speak, I could hear that you had gone through a true journey of forgiveness. And that is really what rang out to me. I was like, whoa. And I even told you when I heard you speak, the audio wasn't that good, but it didn't matter because what you were saying was loud and clear. And I was like, this is a pivotal part of moving forward after divorce. Yes, we need to heal, but we have got to forgive. So tell me two things. How critical was forgiveness? And is my assessment right? What does that journey look like? And then finally, who did you find you needed to forgive? Because I think that's important as well.
Right. And I say all the time, wholeness is impossible without forgiveness. A critical part of who we are, if we want to be all that God desires, a critical part of who we are is having the ability to forgive and move on with our lives. We have to be unencumbered with the baggage that unforgiveness brings, because unforgiveness is heavy. It is a heavy load to carry. It weighs us down in so many ways. I actually dedicated an entire chapter in the book to unforgiveness, to forgiveness, and it's called Recovered. And recovery is synonymous with regaining. When we recover something, we regain it. We regain control. We regain joy. We regain peace. Whatever was lost or whatever was weakened, you know, we regain it, we recover. And so when we don't forgive, we're setting ourselves up for partial recovery because we're not going to get it all back. Who goes into surgery and tells the surgeon, hey, just do half the surgery? I just want a partial recovery. No, I want to do everything that you know how to do. Let's pray and let's make sure that everything's in line. I want a complete recovery. So if I'm recovering, if I'm regaining my life, but I'm choosing not to forgive, I will never be whole. It goes hand in hand. And I tell people all the time, forgiving sets the captive free. And guess who the captive is? It's the person that chooses to forgive. It's you. So in order to be whole and lacking nothing, I got to be free. And I can't be free if I'm weighed down with unforgiveness. And so once you realize the power embedded within the act of forgiveness, you will adopt it as your lifestyle. And even if we think of how we're forgiven and we don't deserve it, and the grace that we have and the mercy that we receive from God through Jesus Christ, it should blow our minds. And so we're also commissioned from God to do the same thing, So not only is it lifting the weight off of me, it's expected from God that I forgive. That's his expectation.
There you go.
Right. And so a young lady asked me recently, and I'm so glad you talked about separating healing from forgiveness. A young lady asked me recently, she says, how do I forgive someone who keeps doing the same thing? And my answer to her was, you got to keep forgiving. Now, what they're doing is over here, and what the forgiveness is over here. Let's not meddle the two together. Let's not give an excuse for unforgiveness because he keeps doing the same thing. You draw boundaries. You make decisions that protect you. You communicate your needs. But over here, you got to forgive no matter what's going on over here, So that's one of my favorite topics because it set me so free. And I can look in people's eyes and tell when they're not ready to talk about forgiveness. A lot of times I'll tell them what will happen if they choose not to forgive, because that's in my mind, I know you think you're not ready to forgive, but you're not ready for the consequences that unforgiveness brings either.
Good.
Yeah. So, I needed to forgive my ex-husband. I needed to forgive myself because there are going to be things in a divorce that we're going to say that we're not going to be proud of when we look back. We were acting out of emotions and all those fleshly desires and things like that, anger that we talked about. So forgiving others is important, but also there are times when we just have to extend grace inward. Yeah.
That's so good, because I think a lot of times people struggle to get past the forgiveness of someone else, and they struggle more to forgive themselves.
Right.
And they hold themselves in bondage, and they try to tie it to someone else when it's really the bondage that they're holding themselves in, and feeling as if they have to pay some penalty as a result of the choice or decision to consider divorce. And so it's almost like, well, now I have to bear the brunt of this. And, I'm not going to let myself experience joy again. I'm not going to let myself experience happiness again because I took this journey that feels like failure. Let's talk about that. And maybe, before we talk about, because you may touch on it, in the 3 steps that we're going to cover. So I won't take us down the failure path, but let's just really recognize what you touched upon, which is the necessity to set ourselves free. So your journey prompted you to kind of harness this as purpose. And I'm sure you never thought when you were going through it that this is going to become my mouthpiece. This is going to become my leading way to help others, is this thing I went through that felt like crazy going through it. Right. But ultimately, you're there for people who are now walking in those shoes, and you birthed the book. And within it, you talked about the 7 ways God heals after divorce. And I think that that is a beautiful testimony for how you have allowed him to take your pain into purpose. When did you recognize that you were purposed for this, and going through that process wasn't just about you?
I think that, I had to say how selfish it would have been of me to get through a difficult season
Mhm.
and then witness others struggling and not share the promises and hope of God with them. You know, I knew how free I was, and I wanted to see others experience that victory through Christ as well. I'm just honored to be God's vessel, to walk with women through their journey. And so I realized that what I went through was not to be written in my mind and heart only, but it was to be shared with others. I think God put me in a lot of different situations where women would reach out. We were in a small group or whatever, or one-on-one, and they would talk about their struggles with separation and divorce, and I would share some wisdom with them. And the group wouldn't even be about that. But people would pop up all the time, and I was in a position to share what I had been through. And so then I realized, you know what? My reach can go further than just a one-on-one. This is something that I felt compelled to do. And so also, not only to see women healed, but also when I sit across from a woman who is troubled, whether I'm a care partner or in a small group or anything, I realize there are more people sitting across from me than just her. Her children are sitting there.
Ooh, that's good.
Her friends, her other family members, coworkers, people that are struggling themselves that she's going to be able to reach out to one day and help. And so her healing will produce fruit in all of those that she touches. And that's when we're talking about kingdom work and kingdom results. Families are healing, and it continues to permeate out, because the enemy does not want to see families heal, divorced or not, and the strife that comes with divorce, whether it's unforgiveness, lack of healing, partial healing, or whatever, that's the enemy's playground, So there was purpose because God showed me, this is what I need for you to do. You have a platform, you have wisdom, you know a little bit, you made a lot of mistakes. Let's talk about the mistakes as well as the victories. Yeah.
Thank you for your obedience and your willingness to be transparent. Thank you for that, because I think that definitely opens the door for women who are suffering in silence. Women who feel alone, because that's the first thing we always feel.
Yes.
We feel that no one can relate, no one's been through, no one's experienced, and even worse, no one has overcome. And
Right.
I think by your willingness to be that voice, that partner, and be willing to be transparent, you absolutely can not only just save the person across from you, but I love how you talked about saving everyone around them.
Right.
And it's really key because that resentment turns into bitterness, and that affects everybody around you, certainly.
Yes.
So the book covers 7 steps, and we'll talk about the first 3. The first one is rescued. Share more about rescued in the context of it being the first step after healing that God gave you after divorce, and why is this a key step?
Okay, in rescued, I talk about the fact that we just want expedient rescues from tough situations. We just want to get out fast. We want the pain to stop. We want everybody to line up the way we think they should line up, you know. But we must understand that God's timing is perfect and ours not so much, you know. The perseverance and the endurance, the maturity, the wisdom that we gain when we allow God at the helm of our rescue mission, those things are irreplaceable. So I talk about the fact that we undermine our own healing by attempting to rush through the process of being rescued. You know, we live in a world, like I said, of everything being so fast. And so when we attempt to rush through a difficult era and we're focusing only on the rescue, we're not focusing on the journey while we're being rescued. So we're making decisions again based on our bodies and our souls, you know, and I talk about in Rescued, I talk about pitfalls that we tumble into when we try to reach for the fast and right now solutions in order to alleviate the pain. Because we think if we just go fast, you know, that we're going to quickly get back to normal. And that's a facade, because there is no normal that you'll get back to. It's kind of like after this pandemic is over, things will be forever changed. We will never go back to doing things exactly the way that we did before. And it's also the same in the pandemic situation of a divorce, you know, so it takes time for us to adjust. We're going to be rescued. God is going to make sure that we're rescued. We have a part to play in that. You know, and that's what I tell women also. You have a part to play in your own rescue. It's not all on God. There are things that you need to do. There are things that you need to listen to God tell you to do and actually put them into play consistently. You know, so let's not rush through to get to the end, you know, the finish line. There's some things that we've got to go through before we get there, because when we get there, we want to wave that flag of completion, of wholeness, you know, of complete healing, of complete forgiveness. You know, we don't want to get there half ready to move on to the next step that God has for us. So that's what I talk about in Rescued.
That's good. Now, step 2 is renewed. Help us understand more about this step.
Yeah, renewed. Do I conform to the world, or am I transformed by the renewal of my mind? You know, can I discern the will of God from my life? That Romans 12:2 stuff. That's what I deal with in Renewed. When we find ourselves conforming to the opinions and the desires of the world, our minds are misaligned with God. So step 2 deals with renewing our minds, aligning ourselves here with God. One of the main questions that I hear divorced or released women, as I call them, ask is, who am I now? Who am I now? You know, their whole world has been shaken. It's been turned upside down. Their personal identity has been compromised. You know, everything has shifted. And so answering that question, who am I now, with our worldly parts, with our bodies and with our souls, we see it leading to undesirable behaviors. So we get into this vicious cycle of, I'm in pain, I'm going to make a decision, I want that quick rescue, I'm going to do this, I'm going to say this, and is this who I am? Because then women, when they do that and they go through that cycle, they become someone they don't recognize, and they get so far out, it's like, I don't know who I am anymore. Well, what decisions have you made to get to the point where you don't know who you are? And let's backtrack and see where we got off the road. So when women say, who am I now? My answer to that question every time is this. Let's answer that question with your spirit alone. You are an imager of God. You're a representative of God. always, no matter what's going on. So transforming ourselves by the renewing of our minds just empowers us and gives us the capacity to resist acting out on our emotions and acting out on our fleshly desires. So if your mind is aligned correctly, your thoughts, your words, all your actions are going to follow, and you'll know who you are no matter what's going on in your life. And that's the key to living a renewed life.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. That is so good. It makes me think of, as a man thinketh, so is he. And that is so critically important, to renew our minds and to understand what God says about us. And I would imagine, after going through a traumatic experience, when your name, your identity, all of that is challenged and possibly needs to change, you begin to question who you are. And so renewing your mind has to absolutely be the right step. And I'm gonna tell you, I love that you say, let's answer that with the Spirit, because that's a critical part. We tend to try to define ourselves by our title, or define ourselves by our relationships, or define ourselves by our achievements, even our jobs. Like, we give ourselves these definitions, but understanding who He says we are and renewing our mind to that point will sustain us for the journey of healing and forgiveness. So that's really, really good. Step 3, and this is the last one we're going to cover, because I want people to support you and get your book. So step 3 of the 7 is the last that we'll cover, is remixed. So share a little bit more about remixed and why that's a must.
Remixed, I talk about embracing change. In this step, I use the example of a track runner. I give a funny example at the beginning of this chapter of myself. I was in high school and I was running hurdles, which I hated. And I made it actually towards the end of the race, and I knocked a hurdle down, and then I just stopped. And I stood there and I just stared at the hurdle that I just knocked down. And my teacher was on the sidelines, and he was just telling me to finish the race. Don't stop just because you knocked a hurdle down, And so I made the analogy between that story and how a track star, of which I've never been by anybody's stretch of the imagination, but a track star has to be trained. And the biggest part of that training is to allow her trainer to alter some things within her, to change her, to remix her, to ensure that she's going to be successful when she runs those races. So she may have to change some old patterns, some habits. She may have to strengthen some of her weaknesses. So I talk about the fact that we have to allow God, the ultimate trainer, to have complete access of every part of us so He can remix us and mold us in the way that He knows we need to be remixed. I use a quote by Bryant McGill in that book, and it says, "Change can be beautiful when we are brave enough to evolve with it. And change can be brutal when we fearfully resist it." So allowing God's remixing process is key in the healing. At the end of this chapter, I also quoted Isaiah 43:2, and it says, "When you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you." So you may go through some tough things, but they will not kill you. They will empower you. And also at the end of this chapter, I created a personal Saundra scripture, and it reads as this: in spite of the hurdles you will face along life's races, you will not be denied at victory at the finish line. Just keep going through. Don't focus on what you didn't accomplish, but on what you did. Whatever you need, God will provide if you allow Him to remix you along the way. And whatever you do, don't stop. I call that my Saundra 1-in-1 scripture.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Whatever you do, don't stop.
Yeah.
Keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. You know, one of the things that some people may look at, especially because I tout so much about success, is how can I look at this situation where a family was impacted? And I think you recognize that you had an accountability, and your husband had an accountability too, in what took place. How could I look at this and say that there is success in this experience? And I guess I look at it and say that you did keep moving forward, and you did not let it stop you. You did not let it erase or deter you from pursuing all that God wanted to continue to manifest in your life. And I don't look at it as a loss. I look at it as a lesson, because you grew in that experience, and you did not hold back and say, this is something I want to sweep under the rug. This is something that I don't want to acknowledge has happened. Instead, I want to lend my voice, my hands, my platform to be able to help serve others that I know are suffering in silence. And to that, I say, you are successful. So thank you so much for doing that, for being courageous, for being authentic, and for being transparent. And I am so glad that you took your healing journey, and you took your journey of forgiveness and allowed it to transform your life into something beautiful that you can enjoy and continue to flourish with. So thank you so much for giving us that testimony. It is powerful, and it's more relevant than I think you know. And I think you're discovering more and more how relevant it is, because there are a lot of women who need your example and need your voice. So thank you so much for lifting it. All right, around these parts, I try to challenge people to build a life they love without apology. And I always close out with our questions, our love, life, and pursuit of happiness questions. So this is all about your wisdom. So tell me, what's your life wisdom that you would tell your younger self if you could?
I would tell my younger self that your strength is going to come from God. I love the scripture, Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Don't be frightened. Don't be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So I would tell my younger self, you're never alone, Saundra. You are never alone. You don't have to fear. You don't have to be troubled. Take strength and take courage in every situation. You're going to win. God commands it, and He is your strength. That is the life wisdom that I would tell my younger self.
I love wisdom. What would you tell your younger self about love if you could?
You know, love ultimately has a name, and that name is Jesus Christ. I would tell my younger self to love as closely to the way that Jesus loves, every day in every way, as many people as you can. You know, follow the example of the ultimate love, God through Jesus Christ.
That's beautiful. And then finally, your happiness wisdom. What would you tell your younger self about happiness if you could?
In the book, I have a chapter that near the end of the book called Re-emerged, and it's talking about coming forth again, coming forth with a new purpose, coming forth triumphant at the end of a difficult season. So when we experience the powerful hand of God in our lives, when he brings us through a wilderness, we experience a happiness that can't even be described with words. So I would tell my younger self that at the end of each tough season, you're not going to be the same person. You're going to grow each time. You're going to re-emerge wiser. You're going to re-emerge with more joy every single time. Learn to just relax. Learn to lean into the joy of the Lord, because he is going to secure your happiness at every stage of your life.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Lean in.
Lean
Right?
in.
Lean in. That is so good. Saundra, you have been a treat, more than you know, a blessing, in fact. So thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. And I just want you to know that success looks so good on you. It really,
Well, thank you.
does. Thank you so much. And that concludes our episode. And again, if they want to find out more information about your book, please share how they can get a copy of it.
I'm on Amazon. If you search my name, which is Saundra, Saundra, Taylor Busby, you'll see the book come up. I also have a landing page called releasedandhealed.wixsite.com/7ways. And so you can see there some more information about the book, contact me, get in touch with me. And it's just been a blessing. Thank you, Denise, so much for your platform and for your reaching out, your heart, your transparency. I really, it's just great that we met each other not too long ago. We just connected and really have a lot of admiration and respect for what you're doing for women.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I know you felt the power. I know you felt how she shares and helps women in one of the deepest, darkest times they may find themselves. The reality is that life, though we desire for it to be perfect, sometimes we get thorns. And her experience was one where she continued to cultivate her garden, and she sees roses now. The brightest rose in the garden is herself, because she didn't give up on who she was and what she deserved. She continued to press until she saw the success of herself manifest in a way that she could embrace. I love Saundra. I love her story. I love what she ministers to, because the reality is some relationships end in heartbreak. But when it ends that way, it should not rob you of your life forever. We've got to let the healing begin. We've got to let the forgiveness take place. I hope you were blessed today. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.
Well, that's it, beautiful. Thank you for tuning in. Don't ever forget that you truly deserve life, love, and all the happiness your heart can hold. Be relentless in building a life you love without apology. I'm Denise Taylor, and you can always find me in our free Facebook community. Life, love, in the pursuit of happiness, easy to find. Now, if you want more information about my success superpowers, as I'm sure you do, download my free Success Superpowers ebook at denisetaylor.live/podcast. And one last thing, always embrace your power and go.